Today on The Jump, he finally did it. Yep, Steph Curry literally shooting the lights out. Uh-oh, is Giannis getting more confident from the outside? The answer, friends, is yes. And the Bulls don't have next, they have right now. Yeah, LaMelo, Lonzo. We've also got tons of white chocolate in this show because why not? Counting down Jason Williams' most ridiculous dimes. Keep it locked, friends.
You could have a whole hour of that show a few times.
I think it's possible people would want to watch an hour of Jason Williams highlights before an hour of...
Or at least I would give for that.
Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols, joined by our senior writer over there. I see him, host of the Low Post podcast, Mr. Zach Lowe, and our 2016 NBA champ, four-time NBA Finals appearances, Richard Jefferson. I don't want to sell short your bronze Olympic gold medal.
Please don't.
Dave McMenamin and Clint Capella are also going to join us later. First, though... the jokes. You heard one at the top of the show. They rate themselves, didn't they? After the lights at the arena in New Orleans briefly went out in the middle of last night's Warriors-Pelicans game. Guess Steph Curry shot the lights out, and Steph is so hot these days, turning out the lights is all you can do to stop him. Actually, that last one is probably basically true, which may explain why everyone else was laughing at the absurdity of what happened at the old Smoothie King Center. Steph himself did not seem to be among them. Here's the video, if you haven't seen it. Second half, Warriors up by 6. Steph gets the ball outside the arc, loads up to shoot, and darkness. The good news was the blackout only lasted a few seconds, but you can see Steph shaking his head afterward, and not just initially, but over and over as he paced the floor. You could also see Steve Kerr also clearly unhappy. And look, I get it. Having been in the building more than once when something like that has gone wrong. Yeah, I was in the stands in also New Orleans when the lights went out on the Super Bowl in 2013, and it honestly felt like a visual record scratch. 1 minute you're watching Ray Lewis, Colin Kaepernick, then things start to go black all around you. Everyone starts talking at once, which means the sound of the crowd gets weirdly deafening, and then you see the emergency light switch on, like you're in some bizarre 70,000 person airplane safety demonstration. It was completely unnerving, but it actually wasn't even the most drastic event to interrupt a championship game. For that, you can go back to 1988, Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals. This footage is amazing. Wayne Gretzky and the Oilers, Ray Bourque and the Bruins. The air conditioning at Boston Garden just could not handle the heat outside. The ice started to melt. Guys are skating around in fog, and then the power overloaded, and all the lights crapped out entirely. Also, you could go back to 2007, a regular season Warriors-Sonics game during which the scoreboard actually caught fire and they had to lower the Jumbotron to the middle of the court. Now, I was not at that one, but I was in Minneapolis to cover Giants-Vikings back in 2010. We woke up to news that snow had started leaking through the Metrodome roof. The entire roof collapsed. That's got to be one of the coolest. Absolutely insane, and they did move that game to Detroit. I was also in Las Vegas 2 years ago. Maybe this is me. We were covering Summer League when an earthquake interrupted Zion Williamson's very first game. It was genuinely alarming to see a roughly 75,000-pound scoreboard sway back and forth all over the court. And all of this is to say that, yes, while it might seem silly that an interruption as brief as what happened to Steph last night would affect anything, I can definitely attest it is jarring when something unexpected happens to an environment that we've been trained to feel secure in. And it is particularly jarring to athletes who are so meticulous about their routines. Take a look at the numbers. Here is how Steph was doing before the lights flickered off. 35 points and climbing with more than a quarter to go. And here's what happened after. Steph could only manage 2 whole points on 1 for 11 shooting. Here he was talking about it after the game.
It's a weird situation because we were flowing a little bit, and I guess kind of after that it's kind of a rough offensive situation, but tough game all the way around.
We should note, Steve Kerr said he didn't think the lighting impacted anything, and indeed, it would be unfair not to give the Pelicans the credit for how the rest of the game unfolded. Remember, these two teams had just played each other the night before. Richard called that game. It had been a pretty easy Golden State victory and a pretty rough night for Lonzo Ball, who afterward texted Zion to tell him, quote, "That one's on me, but don't worry, I will show up tomorrow." And indeed, Lonzo, true to his word, not only did he finish last night tying a career high with 33 points, 12 of those came in the fourth, including this clutch step-back one-footer that proved to be the game's dagger. The win, by the way, brought more jokes that maybe the Pelicans needed to turn the lights off at the arena all the time. I'm not sure that's a real long-term strategy, but hey, for one night, it was enough. Another weird chapter in one of the weirdest NBA seasons ever. Richard, what was your reaction when you saw that last night? And more importantly, how the win kept the Pelicans just a couple games out of that
Anybody that watches this
spot.
show or knows me or knows this knows that I think it's funny, because I think most things are funny. Look, the lights went out for both teams. It does suck. And if you can talk about like being in a rhythm and then all of a sudden that edge getting turned, it's obvious. And sometimes it benefits one person, it benefits another. Look, the Warriors were rolling, and all of a sudden that stopped their momentum. You know, the Pelicans were, after struggling the game before, finally, you know, or they were not obviously, you know, the Warriors were in control, and then all of a sudden they had a little break. The Warriors kind of couldn't get a rhythm, and then the Pelicans were able to kind of recover. So it sucks. These are like, we went through 50 years of sports to find 6 instances that this happens. It's kind of a part of it.
I like the idea that this was a whole cloak and dagger operation, right? The Pelicans lost the night before, clinging to any semblance of play in hopes. The game's a toss-up, and I could just picture a Pelicans official on a walkie-talkie. Now's the time. Do it! And then the lights go out right when Steph shoots. Look, you can't read anything into this. It's obviously sort of a silly thing. And yes, the Warriors ended up losing. And yes, the Pelicans are still alive. Like you said, Rachel, it's just another sort of fun, random moment in a crazy NBA season.
There was one that we missed out, though. There's one that we missed out.
So I did not include the San Antonio air conditioning.
No, not that one. Not that one.
Air conditioning.
No.
Okay, what?
The Cal Ripken. The Cal Ripken one.
Right. To the streak.
To the streak. The
Yes.
Cal Ripken streak. All of a sudden, the lights just go out, and the streak continues. And the Cal Ripken, like, look, there's rumors. You can Google them. That's not what this show is about. But ultimately, these things happen. I've seen crazier things, and I've heard crazier things.
I grew up in Maryland as an Orioles fan, and my little 8-year-old self is very sad with you right now, Richard. Do not denigrate our hero.
I'm not. I'm just saying that, like, these things have happened. Lights can go out at the most opportune or inopportune time, depending on who you are.
That Stanley Cup game, I just didn't think a lot of people have seen that footage at this point. It is insane. They were literally continuing to play the game with that much fog on the ice and only stopped after the entire arena shut down. That didn't happen last night. It was interesting, though, not only to see the Pelicans win, but Lonzo Ball thriving again. He led, as I mentioned, 33 points, that tied a career high, 7 threes. He was a hot name at the trade deadline, Zach. He's entering restricted free agency this summer. That means the Pelicans have the chance to match any offer he accepts, but you've got to think he's going to be attractive to other teams, and we've seen teams put poison pills in contracts and things that makes it hard for the home team to match. What do you anticipate happening, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many teams with cap room, and not many of those teams need a point guard, but there are a couple, and we know that those teams are New York and Chicago, and I expect them to be interested. I just don't expect them to break the bank for Lonzo Ball. I don't expect them to poison pill the Pelicans to death or anything like that. I think he'll get strong offers, but I also think the offers will be at the level where the Pelicans, if they think he's a good fit, will and should or could at least retain him. The if there is a big one, though. And those teams that are looking at Lonzo Ball, he's had an interesting season, right? At this point, you have to assume the three-point shooting is real. 38%. He's a legit, pretty good three-point shooter. The bubble was a disaster, and he's left that behind. But he's also not really playing point guard anymore. He's sort of playing a hybrid guard. Zion is the closest thing they have to a point guard, and then probably after that, Brandon Ingram. And so you can't look at him and say, well, he can come in and run our offense the way a traditional point guard would. You have to have the right pieces, the right fit for him. So it's very interesting. I think the Pelicans, look, they've clearly gone up and down on Lonzo over the last year. I think they've got to look at him and say, he seems to fit pretty well with point Zion or whatever Zion is becoming. I mean, he's not just a piece you can let walk and assume we'll get equal talent somewhere down the line.
No, I completely agree. And the point that you made about his three-point shooting, that is key. If you're going to have Brandon Ingram handle the ball, if you're going to have Zion Williamson handle the ball, then that means he is going to be off the ball. And that's where that 38% from three, and you've seen his improvement every single year. That's when it becomes key, because he doesn't need to be a ball-dominant guard. But you can't just replace that type of passing, that type of IQ, the effort that he gives on defense. I wouldn't call him a great defender by any means, but I believe he gives effort and he has room for improvement. But I think Lonzo Ball would be a key pickup for pretty much almost any team with the way he plays and his demeanor.
I do. I've said this since the trade deadline, and there was all that action concerning him, even though he didn't end up going anywhere. His fit with Zion feels real, and when you have a guy that talented, the way Zion is, and his sort of raising up in these last 2 seasons hasn't been completely smooth, why are you disrupting one of the things that is making him into the good player that he is? That just hasn't made sense.
Because they're not winning.
Well, yes, that is true. But to that point, by the way, look, Zach, I agree. It's unlikely that some other team is going to poison pill the Pelicans to the degree that they lose him. But they might have to match it higher than they wanted to, and that is going to then affect the rest of their team construction. So I do think it's interesting, and we'll have to just see how it plays out. All right, guys, how will the rest of the show play out? Coming up in Mavs Heat, Bam Adebayo lockdown. Lockdown on Luka.
Ooh, give him to him, Bam. Give him to him, Bam.
Because he's Luka. If you're a defender, Richard, and you do everything right, how frustrating is this?
It's not that frustrating. It really truly isn't, because if you're going to win at a high level and play against great players,
right.
MJ, Steph Curry, Bron, Kobe, you're going to expect this, but you got to play that defense every time.
I was frustrated on Bam's behalf watching the game, but I'm not an NBA player, obviously. That's a cap tipper. You just got to keep
it. Cap tipper. Keep going. If you get frustrated every time one of those guys hits a shot, you shouldn't be there.
Right. No Jimmy Butler for them last night. You just got to do what you're doing. Miss rim. Giannis, 4 for 12 from 3 last night.
Not bad.
Not quite what he did Sunday, but still extremely good for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Is he getting more confident back there, Zach?
Seems like it. He's stepping into it. He had a sequence last night where he missed one. The ball came back to him. He was like, what the heck? I'll take it again. I still think teams are going to be happy with him taking those shots, but it does feel like the Bucks are ramping up at the right rate, and that Giannis is ramping up at the right rate. And maybe this is part of it. Maybe he's trying to show people, hey, I've been working on this and I'm ready.
People are bad shooters. Like, you see the percentages go down when they're contested, uncontested. This man is teeing it up all day. He's going to go 4 for 12 if he's getting those type of shots. Not saying that you need to run out there and contest them, but you got to at least give him the illusion. You got to make him think, look at that.
I do remember, an opponent earlier this season got in a little hot water by being like, no, we're happy when Giannis take that shot. And everyone's like, ooh, that's a diss. It's not because you were like, oh, he's incapable from 3. It's just better than the rim, where he is automatic. Speaking of which, Cam Johnson cutting down the lane in overtime in Cleveland goes reverse on Jared Allen.
Ooh.
Woo. In hindsight, how good a draft pick was this for the Suns? Zach?
Stylish dunk, first of all. Looks like a good draft pick. People laughed at him, and the pick they traded turned into Jared Culver, who's had a completely lost season. So good, ready-made player for the Suns has fit right in.
All right, look, that dunk right there. People don't understand the degree of difficulty to two-hand reverse over one of the best shot blockers in the league. That's one of the best dunks of the year. Not top 5, but it's one of the top 10 dunks of the year.
There you go. This is coming from a dunker, right? Boom.
Yeah, formerly.
Shout out James Jones. Good pick. Make us. Hornets Pistons. LaMelo throwing an absolute dart to Jalen McDaniels for the finish. Is LaMelo the Jason Williams of the social media era, Richard?
Yeah. Yes, I can't put him straight into the Jason Kidd, like Magic Johnson, but he has a lot of that. And I think his scoring is something that people always talk about, his shooting ability. But his passes, that underhand pass that I saw him throw the other day, the underhand full court pass that he threw over top of the defense, that was the closest pass that I've seen to Jason Kidd in a while.
This is Jason Williams,
I know we're talking about doing a Jay Williams comparison. We're doing a broader conversation.
Zach, do you see the similarities there that our producer Michael Bodner?
I see the similarities, but you don't speak White Chocolate's name lightly. Let's give it a couple years. Let's have LaMelo throw a pass off a body part that isn't his hand before we start throwing White Chocolate's name out there.
This is why, by the way. So these are the top 5 all-time White Chocolate ridiculous dimes. This was 2000 versus the Lakers. Woo! Number 4, 2001, behind the back to Peja. This is where the reluctance comes from, because the man can do this.
But it was the pace at which he could throw those passes too. That's what made him next level. Like, watch this. That's like a chest pass dart, but he throws it around the back on the move.
Behind his back. Yes. 99, the steal and the no look while lying down. This one was just
put Chris Webber in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, amen. First of all, but come on. Every time I see this, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
Woo! And then 2000, finding Corliss Williamson in Dallas.
Okay, all right.
And what's crazy about these passes is that he would do 5 or 6 of these a night. A night he would do this every single time. And it was these are just some of the more fun ones that they decided to clip out.
Number 1, 2000, behind the back, bounce pass to C. Webb.
That's what I'm saying. The speed.
He's so casual. It's like he's just walking around on the sidewalk, having fun, just throwing some passes. He's so casual about it.
If you could do that, you would be casual too. All right, so maybe like a little bit longer for LaMelo Ball to catch up to Jason, but you can see the shades of it. It is so impressive. All right, let's go back to Milwaukee. Talk about that huge win for the Bucks over Brooklyn last night. Second straight game between the two, and once again, wildly entertaining, elite shot making all over the place. And while a lot of scoring happened, Giannis, 36 in the win. That was after his 49 spot on Sunday. After the game, Steve Nash and Kevin Durant talked about the continuity advantage Milwaukee has over Brooklyn. Take a listen.
We've got a gap to make up here. So we understand that's a team that's been running the same offense, been playing together, same schemes on defense for years now, gone deep into the playoffs, and that's something that we don't have. So how can we make up that gap? And that's kind of our life in a nutshell heading home here.
That is a huge factor. I mean, continuity is a big thing in this league, but we got veterans on this team that played in different situations that know pretty much every terminology that goes on in this league and every kind of set that we run on both sides. So that's in our advantage as well, having that veteran leadership. But, we still are a connected group.
All right, so Zach, I'm going to start with you. What did you learn from these two games? 2 Bucks victories in 3 days.
Well, with all due respect to Steve Nash and Kevin Durant, what makes the Bucks interesting is they're not running the same offense as they have in the last 2 years, and they're not playing the same kind of defense they have in the last 2 years, and their roster is very different than it has been, and that starts with Jrue Holiday. And I think in these 2 games, you have really viscerally felt the power of just having another high-level, all-star level player on their team, someone who can go get a bucket, who can bully people in the post, who can actually bother Kyrie Irving, although he didn't bother him too much last night on defense. It just feels so much sort of more potent and powerful. The other thing that I took away is not just that, but it was interesting last night that Bud closed the game with Giannis at center and basically 4 guards. No PJ Tucker, no Bobby Portis, no Brook Lopez. That's a look that we haven't seen a lot of this year, and it's another thing that suggests to me, along with more PJ Tucker at center lately, that they're starting to ramp up and figure out how they want to play.
Now let me give everybody a little bit of a hint. If you are playing against a potential conference finals or conference semis opponent, 2 back-to-back games, 2 weeks before the playoffs, how many games? We got 7, 8 games left before the playoffs. You're not going to show them the defense that you would play against them when you play against them in the postseason. So that's what I love about what Milwaukee has done all year long. They have tinkered with different lineups. They have tinkered with different defenses. They have done all of that stuff to get themselves in a position where whatever you throw at them or whatever defense you're going to try and throw at them, they've already worked on somewhat of an answer. So I really love what Milwaukee is doing. You can see that the Nets will need James Harden, not necessarily to win, but they're going to need him to be dominant. If you're going to be a dominant team and you're going to run through a conference like everyone thought they were going to do, you're going to need to be fully loaded, because if you show up with 2 of the 3 superstars, that brings you to an even level, as in my opinion.
Look
as
at these
Philly.
numbers. I think you can say that you need him to win. If this was a series, you would need him to win. I think these numbers are really, really interesting, because Kevin Durant, of course, is sort of the activator. You throw him on any offense and he just kind of can perform magic. But James Harden is their MVP level point guard, and he has not been playing in these games. So by definition, assuming he is able to make it back by the time these two would meet in the playoffs, it is going to be a different series, different defenses, things like that. I think not having James Harden there mattered more than we maybe have talked about in the last couple of days. I do think that Jrue Holiday's defense on Kyrie Irving was really something to watch very impressive. And I was at that game on Sunday, and going into it, I talked to a lot of the Bucks about what they have been able to learn this season. They tried defensive switching in a way that they hadn't before, different offenses than they have before, and they really feel they are going into these playoffs more flexible and more prepared than they have since the Bud and Giannis pairing started.
The one thing that I'm going to say is this. Where it becomes so difficult when you have three superstars is, okay, Drew Holiday, Kyrie's great. Drew Holiday is a solid defender. Drew Holiday will do as good of a job as anybody. But then who guards James Harden?
That is my point. So James Harden I don't think you can say like, oh, well, James wasn't there, so blah, 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 blah. It's such a huge difference. I almost can't look at these games. They're great confidence builders for the Bucks, and I think it's great to see the Bucks offense functioning the way they are, their defense functioning the way it has been, an improvement over some of the games last week. But that being said, like, I can't evaluate this matchup because there's no James Harden in it. And we saw the numbers, and he just makes such a significant difference. We will have to see. Of course, there's no guarantee he or any of the big three will be there in a playoff series because we just haven't seen it that much this season. But the intention is for them all to be there. Zach Lowe, we're going to take a quick segment off, but stick around. You will be back later in the show, and you're bringing your friend Clint Capella with you.
Okay.
Coming up, though, we're going to talk a little bit Thursday and Friday to rest his injured ankle. So we welcome in now ESPN NBA insider Dave McMenamin covering the Lakers. How optimistic, Dave, are the Lakers that 2 more days of rest is actually going to make a difference for LeBron?
I spoke to a source close to LeBron yesterday who said we're focusing on the big picture right now. So does big picture just mean 2 more games missed? I'm not so sure. And one thing, though, we know from reporting last week was when LeBron came back, no one necessarily expected him to come back as that game. The Kings game wasn't like circled on the calendar for weeks and weeks and weeks. In fact, I had a source tell me that he was looking at Monday's game against Denver, if not Thursday's game against the Clippers. So LeBron felt good. He sped up the timeline, but obviously now Frank Vogel said it's not a setback. I don't know how you couldn't call it a setback because LeBron said he had sharp pain for the first time that he didn't experience at any time during his ramp up. But right now, like, whatever happens over these next 2 weeks mean absolutely nothing compared to what could happen in the playoffs. So he is clearly prioritizing using every bit of time he can to get even better and get back for the playoffs.
Well, look, this is a tough spot because as much as he is superhuman, and we've all seen that, we haven't seen many injuries. Let's go back and look at the injury when he hurt his groin and missed substantial time. When he first came back, it was not like all of a sudden everything was great in La La Land. It took him a long time. They didn't have the rhythm that they wanted. So ultimately, when I looked at, how he's playing right now and how their team is going to look in the future, get right. Get 100% right. Because if you tweak that ankle, that becomes a setback. But if you can actually go out there and be 100% in 10 days and 2 weeks, I think he probably felt the urge to get back a little bit sooner because he saw them dropping and tried to avoid the play-in game. But then you realize that if you do get in the play-in game with that hurt ankle, like, you're not 100%. So it could go from bad to worse.
Richard, as someone who has experienced playing with LeBron and also experienced getting really old in the game.
That probably more so.
Great. Is this kind of, look, he is superhuman, as you say, right? And he's able to do things in year 17, year 18 that we have never seen a player be able to do before. But is the fact that he's had his 2 most major injuries of his entire long career, 2 of the last 3 years, is that kind of part of what comes with being this age in this sport?
You would say yes, but, I think the groin one, probably more so. When somebody rolls on your ankle,
it is what it is,
and you rolled on the ankle in such a weird way that it was a body, it wasn't like your weight coming down. So I think that adds like a little bit of difference to the injury. And then you combine the fact of how short of an offseason that they had. So it's like your body is already, in deficit mode. And so, I don't know. When I look at this Laker team, I just feel like if they can get 100% healthy and probably more importantly, avoid the Clippers in the first round, that to
Clippers are the Suns, I think.
Yeah, I think the Suns, if they were 100% healthy, would be a 5-6 game series. But if they're not healthy, I think the Suns can win in 6 or 7. So I think they're more worried about a fully whole Clippers than a fully whole Suns.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I just think there's a couple teams out there right now. If they played this Lakers team with LeBron still ramping up, the Lakers would be very susceptible to losing in the first round.
I just don't know can they even be, Dave, 100% healthy by the playoffs, considering that AD's been back, but it's taken him a few games.
Maybe not 100%, but if they can avoid, in my opinion, like Clippers or the Suns, the two teams you want to avoid, and you could perhaps beat a Denver, beat a Utah in a long series in the first round and build up your confidence over the course of that series. You'd be playing good basketball at that point for 2 weeks because the NBA playoff series is so long. Then you can start to look at, okay, now we got a rhythm, we got our confidence, we got a little bit more health. And let's go on to the second round. And then who knows what can happen.
That is a lot of ifs, though, right? And by the way, those teams are at the top of the conference because they earned that spot. They are going to be very tough outs in the playoffs. And look, if LeBron doesn't come back, even if he comes back, say, in a week from today, something like that, it takes guys a while to be 100%. And he says he's never 100% after an injury, as Dave and I discussed last week. That does bring us back to AD. How much responsibility, Dave, is AD expected to shoulder for these Lakers? We saw him step up in that Denver game. What is on him now for the next couple weeks as they try to avoid the play-in?
I hope he feels all the weight of the world on his shoulders, and not to be like overly dramatic, but last year when he came to the Lakers, we did a sit down before the season started, and he said, like, when we struggle, I want to hear my name in the news. I want them, letting me know that that's not living up to the standard of Laker basketball. And last year he met every challenge. He played through injuries. He had that return game to New Orleans where he tweaked his shoulder and played through it, and they came back and won the game. And obviously in the bubble he was fantastic. Hit a game winner against Denver. We all know what he did. And he seemed to put himself on a higher echelon. I had a conversation with Bill Oram, who covers the Lakers for The Athletic, the other day, and we were talking about the Denver Lakers game and going into the season, how many executives would choose Anthony Davis over Nikola Jokic? Probably 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10. But at this stage of their careers, what changed in a year? And, Anthony Davis should take that personally, in my estimation, and be like, let's have everyone be reminded of who I am, what I'm capable of doing, and the team clearly needs him right now. And the player he was against Denver was different than the player he was in the 6 previous games he played when he came back.
Well, okay, so yes, there should be a tremendous amount of pressure on AD, mainly because when you look at his time in New Orleans and you're like, can he carry a team? Now, mind you, he didn't have the load of talent that, let's say, a Jokic has right now in Denver, but he had a good amount of talent, especially, the one year when they had Rondo and Drew and all that, and they made a little bit of run. Anthony Davis has to be able to look Bron in his eye and say, dude, get right. I got this. When you got superstar players and you got 2 superstars, and Anthony Davis is a superstar by talent's definition, right? So he has to be able to say, LeBron, you're 36 years old. You won a final MVP. I got this. Get rested, and I'm going to take this defensively and offensively on my shoulders like a top 5 player should. If you don't do that, AD, we can't sit up here and keep calling you a top 5 player. We can't. Right? Your team is struggling. You are back. You now have had a couple of games to get into your rhythm. You are in a stretch where the best player, one of the best players in the world, the guy that was leading for MVP, is now hurt, and he needs you to make sure that you can get him to the postseason, right? Or to avoid the play-in game.
Avoid the play-in.
If you don't do that, Anthony Davis, you want to hear your name in the news, that is 100% your fault. You've gotten 6-7 games now to get your rhythm. We need to see it picked up. And then if you do that and you guys struggle, that's fine. But right now, you want to be a top 5 player, this is your time to prove it.
Why don't Director Jill and Producer Steve, you can put that schedule back up. I just want to underline what we're talking about here because we already know he's out for those 2 games, Clippers, Blazers, right? I don't know if he's coming back for the game against the Suns. To your point, Dave, he might not. They've got a back-to-back in the middle of the following week. He's probably not going to play both games on a back-to-back if he's gingerly coming back from a second ankle comeback. So then you've got 1 game against the Pacers, and then you might be going into the play-in?
Banner night is the 12th against the Rockets. They're gonna. You'd think if he can do it, you'd want to be a part of that. But even then, 2 games?
Right. So
let's say max, it's still only 4 games.
So my point is, when everyone keeps saying, as long as they're 100% by the time they get to the playoffs, we kind of already know they're not going to be, because even if he's back, we just don't see players just presto, oh my God, they're exactly the player they were when they left. They usually need at least 4 or 5 games to get back to themselves.
And just quickly, I was texting with one of the players during this downturn. As long as they get incrementally better, day by day, game by game. They can't be 100.
Right, but they can get,
they hit the bottom. So start building back up.
Yeah, it is. Look, it is all possible. I don't think anyone up here would bet against a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, certainly early in the playoffs.
It's your time, Anthony Davis.
But it's going to be work. It's not going to be just that they breeze in and get it done. All right, Dave, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
We will see you very soon back here.
Nice suit, guys.
It is
Well
a
dressed, yeah.
beautiful
Yeah,
I
suit
think
by
my tie
David
matches
Penniman.
your suit, actually.
Oh, look at that.
Maybe a little.
Here's what the Jump recommends for today. These two are going to do a clothing clash. In the meantime, Zach Lowe writing about how Clint Capella is anchoring the surging Hawks. They are in position to make the playoffs for the first time since 2017. And Clint is going to join Zach and I right here on the show when we return. Richard's going to be talking about clothes with Dave.
Yeah, really good. So this